Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. Appreciate you joining me this morning. We've got some activity in the tropics as things continue to heat up in the Atlantic. Very active across the Western Pacific with storms impacting Asia over the next couple of weeks. Then we're going to talk about the heat wave and severe weather threat to a good chunk of the central and eastern United States who have already been getting battered, but more on the way here in the coming days. So let me share my screen with you. And we're going to start off here with what we're looking at for potentially our next tropical system next week. The next name on the list is Emily. Now, there were a couple of disturbances we were tracking, one moving through the Windward Islands, another that we're still going to keep an eye on here off the southeast coast. But really, the one that looks like it's going to develop is going to happen over the next week. So basically, the end of July into the first part of August. I've put the Bermuda Triangle on the map. I know it's not really a triangle as an area that really needs to be watching this system, but the East Coast still needs to watch it as well. Some trends now for a curve a little bit farther east of the United States does not put us off the hook by any stretch. This is still about 10 to 12 days out, but certainly something we're going to have to keep a close eye on as things can very much change at this juncture. Now, here is a look right now at the area we're watching. It's near the Cape Verde Islands. It has a 0% chance of developing into a named system in the next 2 days. But as it moves into the central Atlantic, the formation chance has climbed up to about 30%. At that point, we're going to be seeing less wind shear and more moisture in place for this system to finally get going. So we're probably looking at later this weekend or the early part of next week when this system develops. I expect that it's going to turn into an orange area here in the next day or two, and then a red area sometime towards the weekend. Now, we're still tracking an area of low pressure. It's pretty weak at this point. It's moving west-northwest towards the Carolinas. We'll send some moisture up that way towards the beaches here this weekend, but the probability of it developing into any kind of named system is pretty much 0% at this point. So I'll watch it for you guys, but I'm not expecting it to develop in anything else. And then the area that we were watching down here in the Windward Islands has basically fallen apart. It may try to reform after it crosses Central America in the Eastern Pacific next week. This is from meteorologist Ed Piotrowski out of WPD in Myrtle Beach, and he's got this great graphic. He put it out yesterday, but the area that we're watching here on average would take about 12 days to reach the United States, at least 7 or 8 to get to Bermuda. So a lot of time still to potentially prepare for something that may end up not being a threat at this point, but it certainly could still be a threat. And a lot of warm water in the way here. These are water temperatures that are running 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. That's about 2 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit above average. Very warm off of the Atlantic coast and also across the Florida Peninsula and Keys. We've seen water temperatures running as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit above average, which is insane. And I really hope it doesn't stay that way, but we've got a lot of potential once we do get a system that can fully develop to go to town here and really rapidly intensify anywhere in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Southwest Atlantic, in the Northern Caribbean, and in areas north of Puerto Rico. So yeah, we're starting to get into the meat of the season in the next few weeks. I think we're going to be dealing with a lot more names and a lot more threats. This one may not necessarily be a threat yet, but we're going to keep an eye on it. Here's a look at the wide view of the tropics, and the Gulf is pretty quiet. The East Coast is quiet. And you can see things are not looking super active in the Caribbean. Just too much wind shear at this point, but that should start to relax as we get to about next week, as we see a phase change in the Madden-Julian oscillation. That right now is really capping any kind of major development on this side of the Earth. Now, in the Western Pacific, things are going to town where everything that develops is very quickly developing. So that is the area we're going to be watching. But I'm going to zoom in and show you our area of low pressure. There's a trough that's bringing a lot of storm activity into the Bahamas, into parts of the Southwest Atlantic. This is Bermuda right here. Yep, it's not a triangle, I realize that. And you can see we do have an upper level feature here over the southwestern part of Cuba, and that is spawning these showers and storms. So we're going to see things picking up across Florida here the next couple of days, which I think is actually good news because we've been baking in South Florida. I've seen record high after record high fall. Typically, we have high temperatures in the low 90s. We've been hitting 98 degrees consistently. Water temperatures got up to 101, and now with the cloud cover, they have cooled into the lower 90s. Still pretty hot, but fortunately not as bad as they were the last couple of days. But you can see we've got another upper level feature in here, and then a big ridge of high pressure over the central Atlantic. And that ridge is what we're going to have to keep an eye on how that takes place here over the next week or so and steers potentially our next system. Caribbean, we can see upper level low spinning here near the Isle of Youth. That is moving slowly west-northwestward. I don't think it's going to develop into anything tropically. You see a little bit too much dry air over the northern Gulf, which protects Texas and Louisiana from any kind of tropical trouble. We also see wind shear out of the west moving from Mexico into the southwestern Gulf. And here's the area that we were watching a couple of days ago. It has not developed, just some thunderstorms over the eastern Caribbean. It's already a lot quieter today in the Windward Islands than it was this time yesterday. But as this moves westward, some models show that it tries to get going here on the Pacific side of Central America off the El Salvador, Nicaraguan coast. So not a threat to land, though, at that point. It'll be moving away. In the central Atlantic, tons of dry air. That's this deep black region here that we see, which is definitely not going to favor any kind of development. That usually hampers it. I don't say usually, it fully does. We do have the monsoon trough here in the central Atlantic, a little bit of a flare up here, but nothing that's expected to develop. And then in the eastern Atlantic, this is the area that some models are showing slowly developing here towards the weekend and then more rapidly developing potentially next week. Still south of the Cabo Verdes, moving westward, still some wind shear and dry air in the way. There's a wave behind it as well that is not expected to develop, but this is the area I'm going to be watching here in the next few weeks for more development. The European ensembles do show about a 30% chance this could be at depression strength here by Friday and Saturday, and then a better chance over the weekend and early next week. And then the European ensembles say that it's not going to survive. It's already weakening for the most part southeast of Bermuda. The GFS disagrees, and I'll show you that in a little bit. We also have another area to keep an eye on here at the beginning of August that, again, may be short-lived. We'll have to, of course, see. But this is looking at all of the ensembles. The European runs 50 of them, and looking at the percentage of them that keep it at depression strength. You do see other rogue areas here where the winds may get to that strength, but it may not be a depression necessarily. And so 20, 30% in the longer range is definitely a threat, but it's obviously not 100%, so nothing forming yet. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Now, the GFS model does show some development here. If you take a look at the central Atlantic and you look at the upper level charts, this is Thursday and this is Friday, we start to see some congealing here with an upper level feature showing up this Saturday morning. Now, on the model runs, we do see there is an upper level low here, which is weakening the ridge that's off to its north. Typically, the ridge would keep it moving westward into the Caribbean, but there is this weakness here, and the models have been kind of struggling in where this exactly sets up. You can see it's moving away here on this model of the GFS, but another trough is moving from the eastern U.S. This is New Jersey. You can't really see it on here. Another trough is moving off the coast here a little bit quicker, and that is going to potentially turn this system more northward towards Bermuda. Now, the model run yesterday, which had this thing coming up to the Outer Banks, was a lot slower with the trough. Notice it didn't dig it all the way down here, and that allows this system to continue westward. Now the trend has been farther to the east, which is what the European's been showing. So I do like the trend if I'm in the United States, but I know it's just a trend, and we've still got quite a bit of time here, about 10 or 11 potential days. You can see the GFS does develop this system here over the weekend, so we may have a depression over the weekend. The next wave we're watching here south of the Cape Verdes, and then we're watching the remains of Invest 95L, which may get going here in the Gulf of Tehuantepec in the eastern Pacific here over the weekend. So, but overall, this trend from the GFS is now turning right. It does have a hurricane, which I don't necessarily would put a lot of belief in at this point because it's still over a week out, but has it now moving by just east of Bermuda and has this trough pushing quicker off the east coast. But this is a week out. Things can still change, so don't let your guard down at this point. Just keep an eye on it. Yesterday, the model run was a little bit weaker, but then developed things farther off to the south and west. So we've gone from north of Puerto Rico to southeast of Bermuda in a few model runs. So the window is still very much up in the air. This was yesterday lunchtime run, which was very scary for the North Carolina coast. Didn't quite make landfall, but it was close enough to be a problem. And then if we looked at the model run after it, we saw an even deeper system, which again was turning right up the beaches here, kind of like Dorian did. And that was really bad for the Outer Banks. And then the model run after has already begun that shift east of Bermuda. The latest model run, by the way, is very close to the run before it and at a similar intensity. And the reason why is that the ridge of high pressure that the GFS had been predicting to be in place is now being broken down by this trough and this front that's going to be moving through the eastern U.S., which could be a problem here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, but we're going to talk about that more next week. Here are the ensembles. This is the European ensemble, and you can see keeping it pretty weak, but already turning it more to the right, and nothing threatening the Leeward Islands or Puerto Rico. And this would be next Sunday night into Monday, so the 31st. And there are some that do develop it into a tropical storm or hurricane, but others that stay weak. The ones that stay weak, by the way, do show at least that possibility that this could still come in west of Bermuda. And the European does not go beyond 10 days, but this could be really bad for Bermuda. All the others say it's a central Atlantic fish storm, and it's still too soon to make that call. The GFS ensembles are still west of the European. And, you know, honestly, the GFS, in my opinion, while it's done some crazy things, I think overall it's been a little bit better on track placement of systems. So I'm trending to lean that direction, and we still have several solutions that are weaker but are moving towards the Virgin Islands and Northern Leeward Islands, and this would be on Monday the 31st. We do have some stronger solutions that are farther north and east and recurving east of Bermuda, but the weaker ones we definitely still need to keep an eye on. As you can see, we may have something in the Southwest Atlantic, and if that wind shear lessens behind this trough, and this would be next Friday, August 4th, my wife's birthday, if it's weaker and this finds a route to escape that trough, then we obviously still need to watch on the East Coast. You see several solutions coming up in this direction. I know the spaghetti is making me hungry here. I haven't had my breakfast yet, but still several solutions that are close enough to the East Coast where we need to watch it. Even though the trend for the ensembles has been to the right, it does not mean we let our guard down just yet. It just means it doesn't look quite as likely. All right, in the Pacific, this is typhoon. I'm trying to remember the name of it already. Ige was the Philippines name, but Doksuri, that's it, Doksuri. And you can see it is really battering the north coast of Luzon very hard here. It has weakened, though, not really because of land, but just because of some wind shear and dry air getting into the circulation, but still a very big storm going right through the strait between Luzon and the Philippines and Taiwan, causing a lot of damage to these islands here. The names of the islands are the Babayan group of islands, and that is exactly where the center has tracked in the last 12 hours, and some rough weather as well for the Batanes Islands. And this storm will continue through the southern strait of the Batanes and into the South China Sea here. This is the track from Zoom Earth, and you can see it is not expected to make landfall on Taiwan, but the effects could still be felt pretty rough here on the western and southwestern part of the island. It looks like, though, we're looking at a Category 2 type typhoon making landfall here in central China, very close to Jiangsu, as a Category 1 or Category 2 typhoon. So we're going to see a lot of damage here for the China coastline, and a lot of rain as this moves inland here over the weekend into early next week with Typhoon Doksuri. So it was a Category 4 up to 150 miles per hour. Very fortunately, although still bad, it did weaken some coming into the north coast of Luzon, and now we see winds are 115 miles per hour. And here's a look at the infrared, and you can see obviously it's got a warmer eye, but certainly that eye is closed up some. A lot of rain impacting Luzon. We're going to hear about deadly floods here, unfortunately, and a lot of rain as well for the southern portion of Taiwan. But fortunately, the worst of the wind is threading the needle here as this system continues to track to the west, and it's going to make a turn to the northwest. And you can see that turn on the ensembles here right into China here at the very end of the week. European also showing that this is going to weaken when it gets into here. And unfortunately, we're not done in the Western Pacific. A very active MJO where we have Invest 91W, which is starting to look a little bit better here on the satellite. It's still got a little bit of ways to go here when it gets into the Philippine Sea before it strengthens. But a lot of thunderstorm activity, and wind shear is fairly limited at this point. So models do show as it moves into the Philippine straits here, it is going to develop. And unfortunately, looks like a big threat here to Okinawa and these islands of southwestern Japan. And this would be in about a week, maybe say 6 days. So next Wednesday. And then that trend is going to be more towards Shanghai, China, potentially, with a threat coming here to the Yellow Sea area, the Yellow Sea coast. Taiwan may miss this one. It may go north of you. The last one's going south, this one north. But again, we do have some solutions that say we could still have a threat to Taiwan, but it's looking less likely. The Canadian model ensembles do have it going here right through Okinawa, but making a right turn and maybe threatening Southwest Japan and South Korea. So we still have a split where some models go west towards Shanghai, the others come up towards Busan in South Korea. Either way, it's not going to be good for you folks in this area. And you can see here, we're going to see a deepening storm system, probably a tropical storm here by Thursday, and then a typhoon by Friday night or Saturday, deepening quickly here into the 940s or 950s, maybe 930s. And this is going to be tracking about 300 miles to the northeast of where the last one went. This would be Falcon, is the Philippine Sea name. So yeah, definitely in Okinawa next Sunday night and Monday, we are potentially going to be dealing with a super typhoon, or at least a category 3 or 4 typhoon. Not a good look for this area. And the GFS model says after that, we're not done yet. It's got something interesting going on here, like a Fujiwara going off the coast of Japan. And this could be bad for Japan here. But again, that's a couple weeks off and more development as well. So we're definitely not done in the Western Pacific. We're on our way to a very bad August, unfortunately, it looks like here for several of these nations here. If you're traveling, that's certainly something to watch out for. We're going to shift gears and talk about the heat and the storm tracks here. We've got heat advisories for much of the central U.S., the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast as we get to the heat of the summer here. A heat wave in place. Large region of high pressure here over the deep south. That is building north and east. On the periphery of it, we are seeing storms this morning over Wisconsin, and this is going to be tracking eastward, a pretty strong upper level trough with it. That is going to likely lead to an outbreak of severe weather as the day wears on. The current radar does show weakening storm complex, but still going here around the dells of Wisconsin, tracking towards Oshkosh, Fond du Lac, and Beaver Dam. But this has weakened some from the overnight hours when we saw severe weather in the Twin Cities and over western Wisconsin. Still quite a bit of rain and thunderstorms, though, moving through on the south side of the Twin Cities into west central Wisconsin. We could see localized flooding across this area as it continues to stay active. But as the day wears on, and I'll get to today's outlook, you can see we've had a lot of severe weather with this system over the Dakotas and back into the high plains. Yesterday, we had a lot of severe weather in the Northeast. I was watching video of the subway flooding in New York City. That's pretty scary. But we are going to have another active outbreak here over the next 48 hours. We have an enhanced risk for severe weather today across the lower Great Lakes. That includes Detroit, Fort Wayne, Toledo, Sandusky, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Lansing, all the way over to about South Bend, Indiana. And this will include a threat for some tornadoes, a 5% chance for lower Michigan, northern Indiana, northern Ohio, and southwest Ontario, which had tornadoes last week. Chicagoland, Milwaukee, you have to keep an eye on this as well. I think the threat's a little bit greater on the other side of Lake Michigan. We certainly have a severe wind threat here today into this evening and a large hail threat. We have another disturbance which will produce some potentially severe weather from Colorado up into the Dakotas here tonight. And that is going to unfortunately be an issue here for the same areas tomorrow where we have a marginal risk. Now, this storm that we're dealing with in the Great Lakes is likely going to bring severe weather to very similar places that had it yesterday. And the threat actually grows for southern New England. So if you're in New Hampshire, down lower Maine, southern Vermont, and Massachusetts, I think this could be a pretty big outbreak for you here tomorrow. A 5% chance for tornadoes across central and parts of southern New England. All right, I'm going to learn to talk. And a 2% chance down to the New York City tri-state area and the Poconos. 15% chance of severe wind all the way down into northern Virginia, and a threat for hail as well with some of these storms, but mainly strong winds and tornadoes are going to be expected here during the day tomorrow. I think we're going to see about 300 or 400 severe weather reports tomorrow, and potentially that much today as well. That moves out here for Friday. We have what could end up being an enhanced risk day on Friday across some of the same places that are dealing with it now. Southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, Iowa, southern Minnesota. We could have some tornadoes and supercells in here, and I am keeping an eye on the potential for maybe even more of an organized complex, which could, I don't want to say derecho, but could get up close to that derecho strength. Here's a look at the NAM model for today in the Great Lakes. And you can see things will weaken this morning, but we'll have a flare-up of additional storms over Lake Michigan and northern Michigan as we have a mesoscale convective vortex moving through central Michigan here around 6 or 7 o'clock this evening. We'll see storms out ahead of it. These will locally have rotation with them. We'll also see individual supercells popping up in northern Indiana and maybe in central Illinois as well, right around 6, 7 o'clock. This is 8, 9 o'clock. Detroit should get hit here around 8 or 9 tonight. And then we see this continuing into Ohio and northern Indiana through this evening. So the worst of the weather looks like it's going to be between about 6 o'clock and midnight tonight. And for southwest Ontario, it will also be in the 8 to 9 o'clock hours. And then this will race off to the south and east. We'll get a break tomorrow, but more storms are going to move into Minnesota later in the day. Twin Cities on south and east. This will continue into northeast Iowa, into the Mississippi Valley, into parts of Wisconsin tomorrow evening. And then we could see some severe weather here on Friday. Going over the exact same areas, this could be the beginning of a mesoscale convective complex or system, which could produce widespread damage with it. Here's a look at rotation in the atmosphere, updraft helicity. These are where the more intense storms can be. And you can see later in the day, eastern Wisconsin around Milwaukee, Sheboygan, and Racine, and then over into central and eventually southern Michigan, as well as Indiana. And Chicago is in this as well early this evening in the 8 to 9 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock time frame. And then northern Ohio could still see some severe weather later this evening into the overnight hours. In the Northeast, we are going to see quieter weather today, but again, things are going to ramp right back up here tomorrow. We are going to see storms moving in quickly from Lake Michigan and then Lake Erie, and then tracking into western PA, eastern Ohio, western New York overnight tonight, and then more storms flaring up here in upstate New York and towards the Ottawa area early in the day tomorrow. But as the heating of the day gets going and this disturbance tracks into New England from Canada, we're likely to see storms firing over Vermont and New Hampshire and then downstate Maine, or southwest Maine, I should say, around lunchtime tomorrow. And then here's where we really have to be watching for potential tornadoes, central and southern Vermont, and then also around the Albany capital region of New York here around 3 o'clock. And eventually this tracks south and east through the Poconos and Catskills around 4 o'clock tomorrow, and then New Hampshire, central Mass, Connecticut Valley, and the New York City tri-state area later in the afternoon tomorrow, likely to see some severe weather. And this will race pretty quickly. These storms are going to move at about 40, 50 miles per hour right through southern New England and out of the area by around 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Still impacting, though, parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Delaware Valley here tomorrow evening, and then moving out here on Friday. All right, I'm going to speed things along here a little bit, but here's the areas we have to watch for potential tornadoes. From the NAM, it looks like northwest Jersey, Connecticut, eastern New York, western central Mass, southern New Hampshire, definitely under the gun. And I'd certainly be watching here as well across Vermont and into southwestern Maine late in the day tomorrow. These will move out and we'll see quieter weather after that. But we've got our next complex to watch on the NAM. This is the first one, but here comes the next one following behind the first one, and likely another storm complex going here as we get towards the weekend. And this would be impacting the Great Lakes region here. This is Saturday, and this will likely track right through the same areas here over the weekend that just received that severe weather. Here is the storm moving through. You can see the cyclone over Lake Ontario tomorrow, right around lunchtime, then tracking through New England, moving out quickly. It'll cool off some, and then the next storm complex drops down from Michigan and southwest Ontario Friday night, and that'll move into upstate New York, western and central PA here Saturday morning, and then track through New England here Saturday afternoon. I think we'll have more severe weather near and to the south and east of this low track. So across central and southern New England and across the northeast here for Saturday. Timing, though, could change. Here's a look at the southeast. We see moisture building here across Florida. It's going to be a more active pattern here over the next several days. Pretty quiet and pretty hot, though, across the Carolinas with limited storm chances over the next couple of days. Here's a look at Florida and kind of pin down some timing here. South Florida is going to get in on some of this rain here this morning, but we'll see locally heavier showers and storms moving across the southern and central peninsula here through the afternoon hours from southeast to northwest. And this is a shift from what we've seen over the last few weeks. And then maybe heavier storms tomorrow in some of the same places. The Everglades could get drenched. Miami could get drenched. Broward County as well. We'll see more of the same here Friday as our tropical wave moves in from the west. And could be very wet. We could see totals that are locally around an inch in the Miami area, but southern Miami-Dade County, the Everglades, down in Monroe County and the Keys, the NAM model is showing widespread 3 to 6 inch rain totals just in the next 60 hours. So definitely be on the lookout for that. High temperatures today, very hot in the plains, getting hotter across the southeast, heating up tomorrow ahead of our severe weather outbreak. 93 from Boston to New York City and Scranton, PA. Mid 90s around DC and Baltimore, upper 90s in central Virginia, and all the way down to Charlotte and Atlanta. So these will be our hottest temperatures so far this summer. On Friday, very hot again in many of the same places. 95 in Scranton, 101 in Peoria, 103 in St. Louis. As we get to Saturday, it will cool off for northern New England and the Great Lakes. It'll stay very hot in the mid-Atlantic and southeast. Triple-digit heat continues to build slowly northeastward into Arkansas and Louisiana. And Sunday will still be pretty hot here in the deep south. We could see some record heat close to 100 in places like Atlanta, Macon, Columbia, and Charlotte, although it will start cooling down here next week as that front pushes down. It'll be very hot still in the southern plains and the deep south, but cooling off for the Carolinas starting on Monday and then Tuesday of next week. But the heat still lingers here. It's not going to really break down. It'll just slowly weaken some and then refuel and revamp here as we get to the second part of the weekend. It's a lot, but I appreciate y'all's time today. If you could subscribe to my channel, we're going to continue to update you on the tropics. Lots of time to watch this next disturbance. Things could still change. Just because the trend is east doesn't mean we couldn't see it go back to the west. I've seen this a lot in my career where we get kind of the windshield wiper effect. And until it forms, we're still not going to have a great handle on it anyway. Thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate being able to have this gift to provide forecasts for you guys and longer range forecasts that maybe we don't get covered on the news. And I can't do it all without my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I give all the glory to God who has given me the ability to do this every day. It's my calling to just share that with you guys because I know it's taken me a while in my life to figure it out, but I've asked God for guidance for doing this because it can be a drag. I work a full-time job. I have a family. I have family things going on. My stepfather has stage 4 cancer. I have a brother who's getting married in South Korea here in November. I've got a lot on my plate, but I don't want to not get up to my full potential and share my gift with you guys. We all have things going on in life, and yet to me, God gives me joy and gives me this ability to do what I can because in all honesty, being a loner and not really being able to serve other people just isn't what God has called me to do. He wants me to get myself out there, to take risks, to share with you guys, and to continue to pour into other people. And I feel better when I have that joy from God. John 15:7 says, "If ye abide in me and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends." The Lord says, I'm going to continue to fill you with joy. I want you to be joyful. I want you to love each other. I want you to love me, God. I want you to glorify your Father. And as a result, I'm going to continue to provide for you. Ask what you will, and the Lord will do it for you. I've asked God just to give me the guidance to do this and to do my very best and to share with you all and to grow and to help others. And I realize there's a lot of other folks on YouTube doing the same, whether or not they believe in God, not up to me to say that. But this is my gift to you guys. This is what I want to do for you all. And, laying down my life for my friends, obviously sacrificing yourself like Jesus did is what God is saying literally here. But really what that means is giving up your worldly desires and turning everything over to God for your friends. And there's no greater love than doing that, because the Lord has loved us and he will continue to love us eternally. And I pray that you accept him and accept Jesus Christ so that you can live eternally and you can have joy in your life and not worry about the darkness and not worry about the enemy and things that can just tear you down. Because I know for me, that's certainly been a struggle, and I know it is for many of you. So happy to pray for you all if you have any prayer requests, and I appreciate your time today. Please have a blessed day, and we'll see you again in the morning. God bless you.